Hello everyone, this is my lecture for this chapter. There's a lot of information in this chapter and hopefully I didn't go overboard, but there's a lot of really interesting stuff about our memory. And I think learning about different ways to enhance your memory can be really useful in this class and in all of your classes. So we're going to talk a little bit about ways to improve your memory. First one is what we call elaborative encoding. And what this is connecting new information that you have to learn to knowledge that you already have stored in your long-term memory. Can't talk today. So you want to make this information meaningful and familiar to you. So Goldberg and Osborne has used the eagle forever, and we can't even think about Goldberg and Osborne without thinking of the eagle. And then of course we have a whole lot of information sort of attached to the idea of the eagle. You know, it's American, it's the strong, it's, I don't know what else, but whatever. So we attach that to Goldberg and Osborne, and they're using that, our ability to encode information that we already have and connect that information. So all we have to do is connect Goldberg and Osborne to the eagle, and now we can't even forget it if we wanted to forget it. A lot of advertisers use mascots because our visual memory is really good, so we visually encode what that Geico lizard looks like, and then we have that silly tune that goes along with Geico and a little saying. And we can't forget it, even if we wanted to forget it. So elaborative encoding is taking information that you already know, that you already have stored in your long-term memory, and attaching new memories to it. So when I put this goofy picture of the dinosaur in it when we were talking about the learning chapter and we were talking about extinction, well, first of all, you probably knew what extinction was. You know what happened to the dinosaurs, right? And so you've got that mental image in your mind when you think of that word extinction. So all you had to do was apply that new information about learning and how conditioning, classical conditioning, and even operant conditioning, when you stop training an animal or a person, you stop giving them a reward, you stop pairing things together, eventually they go extinct, right? So the same thing that happened to the dinosaurs. So that's elaborative encoding, taking something you already know and attaching new information to it. So you probably didn't even have to study that information because you know what extinction means. You know, it means it goes away, and applies to both of them pretty easy. So if you have new information that you're learning and you can connect it to old information that you already know. When I talked about explicit memory, you know what explicit means already. So you don't have to study that a whole lot. You know what it means, and you just have to attach the new information about memory to that word explicit. So elaborative encoding is just making sure that it's helping you to understand new information based on old information that you have. So, and I talked about using mental imagery and also sound information too to memorize stuff. So if you repeat words out loud, you're actually going to hear those words out loud. And some of us maybe have stronger visual memories, stronger sound memories, but the more ways you encode information, the more likely you're going to be able to get that information out when you need it. So if you can encode it with mental images, with sounds, and if you can connect it to memory you already have, you're golden. You're going to do really well on that test. And we're going to talk about mnemonic techniques as well. So there's lots of different ways you can use to encode and remember information. Physical encoding is generally not the most popular, and I'm not sure that you get the same encoding from typing notes and things like that. I see students that do type notes rather than write. A lot of us don't write that much anymore, but that physical active writing actually helps encode information, and I would imagine even typing the information would actually help encode that information too. Also sound encoding, so repeating information aloud, maybe making up a rhyme. I'll give you some examples of different silly mnemonic techniques that you can use, but make sure you know how to pronounce terms. That makes a big difference in encoding that information and getting that information back. Make sure you understand the information, and then also make sure it's really organized so that you can find that information. The more organized your notes are, the more organized your information is in your brain, the more likely you are to be able to get that information out when you need it. Visual encoding is, pairing up an image with something that you want to remember. The weirder the image, that silly dinosaur, the better, because it'll pop into your mind and it'll connect you to all that information you need. So it's like that network of neurons and that network of memories. You have that one memory, that silly visual image, that's going to take you to where you need to go, to take you to that memory that you're looking for. Sometimes color coding your notes can be really helpful. I used to, when I was taking tests, I could kind of flip through my notes. I could tell you what page and where the information was that I was looking for. Sometimes I couldn't come up with the information, but I knew where it was. So visual encoding is really useful. And I just took a picture of this student's notes. It looks like for an anatomy class. But I think this student's going to get an A on the test, and I bet you they can picture, especially this drawing that they did, in their mind. These are very organized. They have different topics and different colors. They're going to do really well on the test. And so really paying attention to how organized your information is on paper, and paying attention to visual information, sound information. So these are some sillier techniques that we can use, that advertisers absolutely use. And this is called acoustic encoding, where we use rhymes to remember things. So I before E, except after C, and then there's other rules that don't apply. 30 days has September, April, June, and November to remember the days of the week. Advertisers use it in a rec. We already know, need a check, and we know it's learner and row, right? Because those rhymes sort of stick in our brain. If you ever had a song stuck in your brain, especially a song you don't like and you can't get it to get out of your brain, that's because our acoustic memory is so good. And so sometimes it's really difficult to get out songs that you don't want to hear. They say to sing a different song. If you got a song in your head, you can't stand it. You don't want to be singing the song in your head. Think of something else. So this is a mnemonic technique that teachers might have used back in the day to try to remember Christopher Columbus. And dates are one of those things that are really hard to remember, because numbers are hard to remember, because you can't attach them to anything in your long-term memory. You can't do elaborative encoding with that, because it's too difficult. It's difficult to encode it. So teachers make up a rhyme. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. And so that really helps kids and adults remember that. Same thing with the commercial jingles. Learner and row is the way to go. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. Give me a break. Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. So all those little songs and catchy jingles are catchy, and that's why they do them. With McDonald's, they have the little tune now. You guys could probably sing it to me. And that's classical conditioning, but it's also using your sound memory. So here's some other memory tricks that you can use. Using an acronym, like a word to represent each item that you're trying to remember. Sometimes when you're trying to remember a list of items or a group of items, it's really helpful to have a word that you can use a letter from each word. So this Holmes represents each of the Great Lakes. Roy G. Biv is the visual spectrum. Many anatomy students will be given all sorts of mnemonic techniques to remember different things, because it's really difficult to remember a whole group of things, and then sometimes you also have to remember the location. Sometimes you also have to remember the order, and that can be tricky. But if you can use a mnemonic technique by using an acronym and putting those words in the right order, then you just have to remember that an acronym, and then you have to attach each of those pieces of information that you need. So we can do keywords. So people that are musicians and learn how to read music and learn how to read sheet music, I guess is the word. We know that face are the whole notes in there, and then we know E, G, B, D, F is the half notes, but you can't really make that into a word, and you need to remember it in the order. So they make a phrase out of it. Every good boy does fine. And every kid that learned music back in the day knows this, right? So these are phrase mnemonics. My very excited mother just served us noodles. It's the order of the planets without Pluto. So Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So much easier to remember this sentence and then remember the names of the planets. But if you want to remember them in order, that gets trickier. So you want to definitely use multiple ways to remember things. You want to use procedural encoding if you can. So when you do hands-on activities in classes, you do an experiment, it can be really helpful in remembering that. Location encoding, there's something called the method of loci, which is kind of complicated, and I'm not going to go into it, but you can kind of picture a familiar place and put things in different places along your path to trigger your memory about what you want to talk about. Some people that gave speeches before we had teleprompters would use that technique, so to kind of walk through their presentation. Didn't have PowerPoint either, because it's really difficult to remember that. So there's, and a lot of times when I'm in a classroom, I remember where a student sits, and I remember their name by where they sit. And so the location of where they are helps trigger my memory, as well as just remembering their name as well. So lots of diagrams can be really helpful, like the note that I showed you what that student had drawn. I don't remember what the picture was of, but if you'd had a picture of the brain where you could identify the different parts of the brain, can be really important to have that visual cue there to help you to remember that information. So use lots of different ways to remember things. So this is kind of an example of how to use visual imagery and location to remember what different parts of the brain do. So we know this is the temporal lobe, we know this is procedural, this is the cerebellum, this is the frontal lobe. This is the parietal lobe, and we know that math, and we also know that Einstein had a larger parietal lobe, and we know that this is our visual lobe here. So using all sorts of things to help you remember can be really effective. But the most important thing that you can do, and probably the most effective thing you can do, is the elaborative encoding. You know, if it's something that you have learned before, you can attach that information to that old information, and then you don't have to spend as much time studying that information. But if you're studying something that's totally new to you, totally foreign to you, then you're going to have to spend some extra time on studying that information. Some of the other stuff is going to come much easier to you because it's familiar to you. So I hope this information helped. There's other memory techniques out there. There's a lot of things out there. But these are kind of the main things to think about when you're thinking about memorizing information. And know that memories are very fallible, but there are ways that we can enhance and improve our memory, and that you have to make an effort. That memories don't just get into our long-term memory that easily, especially new memories and new things that we are not familiar with. You know, the other memories, emotional memories, things like that, we don't have to stress about remembering those. But school information, academic information, you really have to do effortful processing and effortful encoding of that information to get it into your long-term memory. So I hope you enjoyed this chapter on memory, and I hope it will help you with some of your schoolwork. Talk to you soon.